Vincent Carrington fired me on my first day back after his brother Thomas died, claiming I violated company policy when I knew I'd done nothing wrong. What Vincent didn't realize was that Thomas had prepared for exactly this moment, setting up a secret meeting that would change everything. But would I make it to that meeting alive? Or would Vincent's ruthless tactics destroy me first? Vincent Carrington fired me before I even reached my desk. 3 security guards blocked the elevator as I stepped off on the 20th floor of Cobalt Technologies, their hands resting on radio devices like they expected trouble. My badge wouldn't scan at the turnstiles, and the receptionist who usually smiled at me looked away quickly. Something terrible had happened overnight, and I was about to discover what. "Clean out your workspace immediately," Vincent announced from behind Thomas's old desk, his voice echoing through the empty office. Thomas Carrington had been dead for exactly 3 weeks, but his younger brother had already changed everything about our workplace in Crestfield. Gone were the family photos Thomas kept on his desk, replaced by expensive legal documents and stock reports. The warm lighting Thomas preferred had been switched to harsh fluorescent bulbs that made everyone look sick and tired. I stood in the doorway, holding my morning coffee and trying to understand what was happening. "Suspended for what reason?" I asked, keeping my voice calm even though my heart was racing. Vincent didn't look up from his computer screen, treating me like an annoying interruption rather than someone who had worked loyally for his brother for 8 years. "Violation of company policy," he replied, finally meeting my eyes with a cold stare that reminded me nothing of Thomas's kindness. Specifically, sharing private information with unauthorized personnel and questioning management decisions during team meetings. These accusations made no sense because I had always followed every rule carefully, documented my work properly, and supported Thomas's vision for treating employees fairly. The security guard stepped closer, making it clear that arguing would only make things worse. Vincent slid a manila envelope across the desk containing suspension papers that looked professionally prepared, as if he had been planning this moment for weeks. The documents listed violations I had never committed, signed by witnesses I didn't recognize, and included dates when I was supposedly breaking rules while actually attending approved training sessions. "Your access to company systems has been terminated," Vincent continued, gesturing toward my laptop and phone sitting on his desk. "All company property must be surrendered before you leave the building today." The way he spoke suggested this was a normal business procedure, but Thomas had always handled personnel issues with respect and fairness, never through surprise attacks with armed security. Walking toward my cubicle felt like walking through a ghost town because most of my colleagues were avoiding eye contact or whispering in small groups near the water cooler. Deborah Stratton, our accounting supervisor, caught my attention and nodded slightly toward the emergency exit stairwell. Her expression seemed urgent, like she wanted to tell me something important but couldn't speak openly with Vincent's security team watching our every move. My desk drawers had already been searched, with personal items scattered across the surface and confidential files missing from their usual locations. A framed photo of my graduation ceremony was cracked, and the small plant my daughter had given me for Father's Day was knocked over, soil spilling across important client contracts. Vincent's people had been thorough but careless, treating my workspace like a crime scene rather than someone's professional environment. 15 minutes, one security guard announced, checking his watch with exaggerated authority. The message was clear. Vincent wanted me gone quickly, before I could talk to other employees or gather evidence about what was really happening. But 8 years of working for Thomas had taught me to document everything carefully, and I had copies of important files stored safely outside the office. Other longtime employees were receiving similar treatment throughout the morning, with senior staff members being called into human resources for performance reviews that sounded more like interrogations. Vincent was systematically removing anyone who had been close to Thomas, replacing experienced workers with people who would follow orders without asking questions about ethics or fairness. The strangest part was how quickly everything had changed after Thomas's funeral. 3 weeks ago, Vincent had seemed genuinely sad about losing his older brother and promised to continue Thomas's tradition of treating employees like family members rather than disposable resources. Now he was acting like a completely different person, focused only on cutting costs and increasing profits without caring about the human consequences. Deborah appeared near my desk, pretending to deliver routine paperwork while actually whispering urgent information. "Things are much worse than they appear," she said quietly, glancing around nervously. "Vincent has been meeting with competitors about selling our client database, and he's planning to eliminate the pension fund that Thomas worked so hard to build for everyone. Before I could respond, Vincent's voice boomed across the office space, calling Deborah back to her department immediately. She squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "Don't give up hope." Thomas was smarter than Vincent realizes, and some of us are still fighting for what's right. Her words contained a hidden meaning that I couldn't quite understand, but they gave me strength during this devastating moment. Packing my personal belongings took exactly 12 minutes, leaving me 3 minutes to say goodbye to colleagues who had become like family over the years. Nobody dared speak openly about Vincent's hostile takeover, but their worried expressions told the whole story. Cobalt Technologies was being destroyed from within by someone who cared more about money than people. Vincent watched from his office window as security escorted me through the lobby, his satisfied smile revealing the truth about his intentions. This wasn't about company policy violations or performance issues. This was about eliminating anyone who might challenge his authority or question his methods. But Vincent had made one critical mistake. He underestimated how much Thomas had taught us about loyalty, preparation, and fighting for what's right. Deborah Stratton cornered me in the parking garage 30 minutes after my humiliating exit, her face showing a mixture of fear and determination that I had never seen before. She looked around carefully, checking for security cameras or Vincent's spies before pulling me behind a concrete pillar where we could speak privately. Her hands were shaking as she reached into her purse, withdrawing a small envelope that seemed to contain something extremely important. Thomas knew this would happen. She whispered urgently, pressing the envelope into my hands while keeping watch for anyone who might be following us. 2 months before he died, your boss started acting differently around Vincent, like he was suspicious about something serious. Thomas began recording conversations and copying important documents, storing everything in places Vincent would never think to look. The envelope contained a key with numbers scratched into the metal surface, along with handwritten instructions in Thomas's familiar writing style. The message was short but clear. Emergency meeting protocols had been established for exactly this situation, involving only 3 trusted employees who could access hidden evidence that would expose Vincent's real plans for destroying the company. Miles Redford knows about tonight's meeting, Deborah continued, mentioning our lead engineer who had also been acting strangely since Thomas's death. Vincent doesn't suspect him yet because Miles stays quiet during meetings and never argues with management decisions. But Thomas trained all 3 of us to document everything carefully, especially conversations involving company finances and client relationships. The parking garage felt increasingly dangerous as we talked, with every sound echoing off concrete walls and making us jump nervously. Vincent's security team had been asking questions about employee friendships and who spent time together outside of work hours. Several people had already been warned about discussing company business in unofficial settings, and rumors suggested that phone conversations were being monitored without permission. Deborah explained how Vincent had been meeting secretly with representatives from competing companies, offering to sell client information and proprietary technology for enormous personal profits. Thomas recorded one conversation where Vincent laughed about firing longtime employees to avoid paying pension benefits, she said, anger replacing fear in her voice. Your boss died believing his brother would protect the company family, but Vincent was already planning to betray everyone. The key in my hand felt heavier as Deborah described its importance for accessing a safety deposit box containing Thomas's evidence against Vincent's corruption. Bank security footage, audio recordings, copied financial documents, and witness statements from people Vincent tried to bribe, she listed, counting on her fingers. Thomas spent his final weeks building a legal case that could send Vincent to prison and save our jobs. Miles Redford appeared suddenly from behind another car, making both of us jump before recognizing his familiar face. He looked exhausted and worried, like someone who hadn't been sleeping well for days. Vincent's people searched my office this morning, he reported quietly, asking about technical specifications and client passwords. They're moving faster than we expected, probably because they know something is hidden but don't know exactly what or where. The 3 of us formed a tight circle, speaking in whispers while maintaining constant awareness of our surroundings. Miles explained how Vincent had been pressuring him to reveal security codes and database access information, supposedly for routine system updates but actually to steal proprietary information for selling to competitors. He threatened my job if I didn't cooperate fully, Miles said, but Thomas taught me to always keep backup copies of important files in secure locations. Deborah's phone buzzed with a text message that made her face turn pale with worry. Vincent wants to see me immediately about irregularities in financial reporting, she read aloud, her voice trembling slightly. He's probably discovered that I've been documenting his suspicious activities and copying records before he can delete them permanently. The meeting location had to be changed because Vincent's security team was monitoring usual gathering places like coffee shops and restaurants near the office building. Miles suggested an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district where his cousin used to work, a place with no security cameras or nearby businesses that might attract unwanted attention from Vincent's spies. 9 o'clock tonight, Deborah confirmed, memorizing the address while destroying the written directions for safety reasons. Bring everything you've documented about Vincent's activities, including any recordings or photographs that might support Thomas's evidence. We need to be absolutely certain about our facts before taking action against someone with Vincent's resources and connections. Walking back to our separate cars felt like the longest journey of my life, knowing that Vincent was probably watching through office windows or security cameras positioned throughout the parking garage. Each of us drove away in different directions, taking roundabout routes to avoid being followed while preparing for what might be our only chance to honor Thomas's memory and save our colleagues' futures. The warehouse meeting represented hope but also enormous danger because Vincent had already proven his willingness to destroy lies for personal profit. Deborah's frightened expression and Miles's exhausted appearance showed how much pressure we were all feeling, but Thomas's careful planning gave us confidence that justice might still be possible despite Vincent's apparent advantages. Vincent's mistake was underestimating the loyalty Thomas had inspired among employees who truly understood the difference between ethical leadership and exploitative management. Tonight would determine whether Thomas's legacy survived or whether Vincent's greed would destroy everything our mentor had worked so hard to build for the people who trusted him. Black cars started following me everywhere I went after lunch. Vincent wasn't being subtle about tracking my movements, and the message was clear. He knew I posed a threat to his plans for destroying Cobalt Technologies. 2 men in dark suits sat in a sedan outside my apartment building, pretending to read newspapers while obviously watching my front door. Every phone call I tried to make went straight to voicemail, and my emails kept bouncing back with error messages about server problems. Vincent had moved quickly to isolate me from potential allies inside the company, using his new authority as CEO to spread rumors about my suspension being related to stealing confidential information. Former colleagues who had been friends for years suddenly stopped returning my text messages, and the few people who did respond seemed nervous about being seen talking to me in public places. Deborah's situation was becoming desperate because Vincent had called her into his office 3 times since our parking garage meeting, demanding explanations for accounting irregularities that didn't actually exist. She managed to send me coded messages through her sister's social media account, reporting that Vincent was systematically reviewing financial records and looking for evidence of Thomas's hidden documentation efforts. He knows something big is hidden, Deborah's latest message revealed, disguised as a comment about weekend dinner plans. Vincent brought in outside auditors who were asking specific questions about safety deposit boxes, storage units, and off-site backup systems. Miles thinks they might have found some of Thomas's evidence already, but we can't be sure which pieces are still safe. The pressure was affecting everyone differently, with Miles becoming increasingly paranoid about office surveillance while Deborah was struggling to maintain her normal work routine under Vincent's constant scrutiny. Meanwhile, I was discovering just how thoroughly Vincent had prepared for eliminating threats to his authority, including frozen bank accounts and mysterious problems with my car insurance that suggested he had connections beyond the business world. Vincent's security team wasn't just following me randomly but seemed to know my schedule better than I did, arriving at locations before I got there and positioning themselves strategically to monitor conversations and photograph anyone I met with. The grocery store, gas station, and even my daughter's school pickup line had become places where I spotted the same faces watching from different vehicles. My attempts to research Vincent's background through public records hit unexpected obstacles when court documents suddenly became unavailable and business registration files showed access restrictions that hadn't existed the previous week. Someone with significant influence was actively blocking information about Vincent's past activities, suggesting his corruption might extend far beyond what Thomas had discovered. Miles managed to contact me through an encrypted messaging app his tech-savvy nephew had recommended, sharing disturbing news about additional firings at Cobalt Technologies. Vincent terminated 12 more people today, Miles reported, all longtime employees who worked closely with Thomas on client relationships and financial planning. He's claiming budget cuts, but these are the exact people who would know about irregular business practices. The warehouse meeting location had to be changed again after Miles spotted surveillance equipment being installed near the original site, with Vincent's security team apparently conducting reconnaissance on places where former employees might gather. Our new meeting spot was a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of Crestfield, chosen because the constant flow of truck drivers would make it difficult for watchers to blend in naturally. Vincent's tactics became more aggressive throughout the afternoon, with human resources calling my home phone to schedule mandatory interviews about my inappropriate workplace behavior and threatening legal action if I didn't cooperate fully. The timing was obviously intended to prevent me from attending tonight's meeting, but Vincent didn't realize that Thomas had taught us to expect exactly these kinds of pressure tactics. Deborah's sister delivered a handwritten note during her lunch break, explaining that Vincent had offered Deborah a promotion to chief financial officer in exchange for information about Thomas's hidden evidence. "He's trying to buy my loyalty," the note explained, "but he also threatened to fire my entire department if anyone is caught sharing company information with suspended employees." The financial pressure was mounting because my suspension meant no paycheck while bills continued arriving normally, and Vincent had somehow interfered with my unemployment benefits application. My savings account would only last a few weeks, creating exactly the kind of desperation that might force someone to accept Vincent's demands rather than continue fighting for justice. Miles's investigation into Vincent's background had uncovered troubling connections to a consulting firm specializing in hostile corporate takeovers, suggesting that destroying Cobalt Technologies might be part of a larger business strategy rather than simple greed. "Thomas's company is worth more broken apart and sold in pieces," Miles explained through our secure messaging system, "and Vincent has buyers already lined up for different divisions." The evening news featured a story about corporate fraud investigations in nearby cities, with federal agents arresting executives for embezzling pension funds and selling proprietary technology to foreign competitors. Vincent was probably watching the same broadcast, knowing that Thomas's evidence could lead to similar charges against him if we managed to present our documentation to the right authorities. My phone rang unexpectedly just as I was preparing to leave for the diner meeting, with Deborah's panicked voice barely audible over background noise that sounded like office equipment and muffled conversations. "They know about tonight," she whispered urgently before the line went dead, leaving me with the terrifying realization that Vincent had discovered our plans. The choice was simple but dangerous: abandon the meeting and let Vincent continue destroying Thomas's legacy, or proceed with the knowledge that we were walking into a situation where Vincent held all the advantages. Thomas had always taught us that doing the right thing often required courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Miles Redford was already dead when I arrived at the diner. Vincent's security chief stood over his body in the parking lot, speaking calmly into a radio while two paramedics loaded a stretcher into an ambulance with no emergency lights flashing. The official story would probably be a heart attack or accident, but Miles was only 32 years old and had been perfectly healthy when we talked 6 hours earlier. Deborah sat in a corner booth inside the diner, her face streaked with tears and her hands shaking as she stirred coffee that had long since grown cold. She looked up when I approached, and the guilt in her eyes told me everything I needed to know about what had really happened to Miles and why Vincent's people were waiting for us here. "I'm sorry," she whispered, glancing toward the kitchen where Vincent's security team was positioned to prevent any escape attempts. "He has Olivia. Vincent's people took my daughter from school this afternoon, and he showed me photos of her tied up in some basement. He said he would hurt her if I didn't cooperate with his plans tonight." The diner suddenly felt like a trap, with every customer potentially working for Vincent and every exit blocked by men pretending to read menus while obviously watching our table. Deborah's betrayal wasn't voluntary, but that didn't change the fact that we were now completely at Vincent's mercy with no backup plan and no way to contact outside help. Vincent himself entered through the front door at exactly 9 o'clock, dressed in an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase like he was attending a normal business meeting rather than orchestrating kidnapping and murder. His confidence was absolute, suggesting that he had planned every detail of tonight's confrontation and eliminated every possible avenue for escape or resistance. "My brother always overestimated people's loyalty," Vincent announced, sliding into the booth across from us with a satisfied smile. "Thomas believed that treating employees fairly would inspire them to sacrifice everything for the company, but everyone has a price. Deborah's price was her daughter's safety, and yours will be significantly higher." The briefcase contained photographs of Olivia in what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse, along with documents showing how thoroughly Vincent had researched our personal lives, family connections, and financial vulnerabilities. He had been preparing for this confrontation since the day Thomas died, gathering leverage to force our cooperation when threats and bribes failed to achieve his goals. Miles refused to give me the safety deposit box key. Vincent continued casually, as if discussing the weather rather than admitting to murder. He claimed Thomas never gave him access to any hidden evidence, but I know he was lying because my brother documented everything obsessively. Unfortunately, Miles's stubbornness meant his usefulness had ended. Deborah sobbed quietly while Vincent spread additional photographs across the table, showing other employees who had been asking questions about company finances or discussing Thomas's suspicious behavior before his death. Each photo was marked with red ink, indicating people who would face consequences if we didn't provide the information Vincent demanded immediately. The key in my pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, representing not just Thomas's evidence against Vincent, but also the lives of innocent people who would suffer if I refused to cooperate. Vincent's willingness to kidnap children and murder colleagues demonstrated that he would stop at nothing to protect his criminal enterprise and eliminate anyone who threatened his authority. Deborah has already provided me with copies of the financial documents she was hiding, Vincent revealed, producing familiar-looking spreadsheets and bank statements from his briefcase. Thomas was more thorough than I expected in documenting my business activities, but he made one critical mistake. He trusted people who could be broken under sufficient pressure. The security chief approached our table, speaking quietly into Vincent's ear while keeping his eyes fixed on me with obvious menace. Whatever he reported made Vincent's smile grow wider and more dangerous, suggesting that additional threats were being prepared against people I cared about if I continued resisting his demands. "Your daughter attends Crestfield Elementary School," Vincent stated matter-of-factly, producing a photograph of my 8-year-old walking to her morning classes. "She has ballet lessons on Tuesday afternoons and visits her grandmother every weekend." Accidents can happen anywhere, especially to children who aren't being properly supervised by their parents. The moral contrast between Vincent and Thomas had never been clearer than in this moment, with Vincent using innocent family members as weapons while Thomas had always protected the people who worked for him. But Vincent's threats were real and immediate, while Thomas's teachings about doing the right thing seemed inadequate against such ruthless tactics. Deborah leaned across the table, pressing something small and metallic into my hand while pretending to comfort me during this terrifying conversation. The object felt like a recording device, suggesting that she might still be fighting for justice despite being forced to cooperate with Vincent's demands for her daughter's safety. "The safety deposit box contains more than you realize," I finally admitted, hoping to buy time while figuring out how to protect the innocent people Vincent was threatening. Thomas recorded conversations about federal crimes that would interest prosecutors, and copies of those recordings are stored in multiple locations that you'll never find without my cooperation. Vincent's expression shifted from confidence to concern as he realized that Thomas's evidence might be more extensive and better protected than he had assumed. The possibility of federal prosecution clearly worried him more than local business disputes, suggesting that his criminal activities extended beyond corporate fraud into areas that would attract serious law enforcement attention. The recording device in my palm was still running, capturing Vincent's admissions of kidnapping, murder, and extortion that would provide compelling evidence for prosecutors if we survived long enough to deliver it. Deborah's betrayal was actually an elaborate deception designed to gather the proof we needed to destroy Vincent permanently. But Olivia was still missing, Miles was still dead, and Vincent's security team was still armed and dangerous, making our escape from this diner seem increasingly impossible despite the evidence we were gathering against him. Vincent's phone rang 3 times before he realized the FBI was already inside Cobalt Technologies. Agent Rebecca Colton's voice came through the speaker clearly, informing him that federal warrants had been executed simultaneously at his office, home, and the warehouse where Olivia was being held. Deborah's recording device had been transmitting our entire conversation to law enforcement officers who were already building their case against Vincent's criminal organization. "Thomas contacted the FBI 6 weeks before he died," I explained, watching Vincent's confident expression crumble into panic and disbelief. "Your brother knew about your plans to sell company secrets and steal pension funds, so he started working with federal investigators to document every crime you committed. The safety deposit box was just a backup system for evidence that was already in government hands." Deborah wiped away her tears, revealing that her emotional breakdown had been carefully planned theater designed to make Vincent believe she was completely broken and cooperative. "Olivia is safe at her grandmother's house," she announced with newfound strength in her voice. "The kidnapping photos were fake, created by FBI technical specialists to make you reveal your criminal methods on tape. Vincent's security team received urgent radio messages instructing them to surrender immediately, with federal agents surrounding the diner and blocking all escape routes. The men who had seemed so intimidating just minutes earlier now looked confused and frightened, realizing they had been participating in federal crimes that would result in lengthy prison sentences. Agent Colton entered the diner accompanied by 6 heavily armed officers, her badge and credentials identifying her as the lead investigator on a case that had been developing for months. Vincent Carrington, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, extortion, kidnapping, and murder, she announced while handcuffing him with professional efficiency. The briefcase Vincent had brought contained not just threatening photographs, but also incriminating financial documents that proved his connections to the consulting firm specializing in hostile corporate takeovers. Thomas had suspected these connections and spent his final weeks gathering evidence about Vincent's plan to destroy Cobalt Technologies for profit rather than managing it successfully. Miles Redford is alive and testifying at FBI headquarters, Agent Colton revealed, causing Vincent's face to turn completely white with shock and terror. The death scene was staged to make you believe we had eliminated a key witness, but Miles has been working undercover for us since Thomas first contacted our financial crimes division about suspicious activity. Deborah pulled out her real phone, showing text messages from her daughter who was happily doing homework at her grandmother's kitchen table. The emotional manipulation Vincent had used against her was based entirely on lies and staged photographs, designed to force her cooperation while FBI agents gathered the evidence needed for prosecution. Vincent struggled against his handcuffs while demanding to speak with his lawyers, but Agent Colton explained that his legal team was also under investigation for helping him hide stolen money in offshore accounts. The consulting firm's other clients had been arrested in coordinated raids across multiple states, with Vincent's organization being just one part of a much larger criminal enterprise. Thomas installed recording equipment throughout his office after discovering your meetings with competitors, Agent Colton continued, producing a tablet showing surveillance footage of Vincent discussing plans to sell proprietary technology. We have hundreds of hours of recordings documenting your criminal activities, along with financial records proving you stole over $2 million from employee pension funds. The diner had been chosen as tonight's meeting location because FBI technical specialists needed a controlled environment to ensure high-quality audio recordings that would be admissible in federal court. Every word Vincent had spoken about kidnapping, murder, and extortion was now permanent evidence that would guarantee his conviction on multiple felony charges. Vincent's security chief was led away in handcuffs while protesting that he was just following orders and didn't know about the illegal activities. But Agent Colton had recordings of him discussing Miles's fake murder and Olivia's supposed kidnapping, proving his willing participation in federal crimes that carried mandatory minimum sentences. Deborah's sister arrived at the diner to drive us back to our homes, explaining that she had been working with FBI agents to coordinate the evening's activities and ensure everyone's safety. The federal investigation had required months of careful planning to gather sufficient evidence while protecting potential witnesses from Vincent's retaliation. Thomas knew he was dying, Deborah revealed during our ride back to Crestfield, so he accelerated his timeline for exposing Vincent's crimes and protecting the company he had built from nothing. The heart attack was real, but Thomas had already provided federal investigators with enough evidence to prosecute Vincent successfully. My suspension from Cobalt Technologies had been part of the FBI's strategy for protecting me while they completed their investigation, with Vincent's aggressive tactics actually helping to document his criminal behavior more thoroughly. Thomas had requested that I be kept safe until the arrest could be made simultaneously. Agent Colton's final surprise was revealing that Thomas had restructured Cobalt Technologies' ownership through a legal trust that would transfer control to employee shareholders if Vincent was removed for criminal activity. The company would continue operating under ethical leadership while Vincent spent the next 20 years in federal prison. The recording device Deborah had given me contained not just tonight's confessions, but also weeks of conversations she had secretly captured while pretending to cooperate with Vincent's demands. Her apparent betrayal had been the most dangerous part of the FBI's plan, requiring her to risk everything while maintaining her cover identity. Vincent's empire was collapsing faster than he could have imagined, with federal agents seizing assets, freezing accounts, and arresting accomplices throughout the night. Thomas's legacy would survive and flourish, while his brother's greed had led to the complete destruction of everything Vincent had tried to steal. 6 months later, I walked into Thomas's old office as the newly elected CEO of Cobalt Technologies, chosen by employee shareholders who wanted to continue his vision of ethical leadership and fair treatment for workers. Vincent was serving a 25-year sentence in federal prison, and his criminal organization had been completely dismantled by ongoing FBI investigations. Deborah Stratton had been promoted to chief financial officer, using her expertise to rebuild the pension fund that Vincent had nearly destroyed and implementing stronger safeguards against future fraud. Miles Redford returned as head of security, developing new protocols to protect company information while maintaining the open, family-friendly culture that Thomas had worked so hard to create. The warehouse where Olivia was supposedly held had actually been an FBI staging area for gathering evidence about Vincent's criminal network, with federal agents using the location to coordinate arrests across multiple states. Deborah's daughter never knew about the danger she was allegedly in, continuing her normal school routine while her mother risked everything to gather evidence against Vincent. Thomas's desk now held family photos again, along with awards recognizing Cobalt Technologies as one of Crestfield's best places to work under ethical management practices. The harsh fluorescent lighting had been replaced with warm, comfortable illumination that made employees feel welcome and valued rather than intimidated and surveilled. Agent Colton visited our offices regularly to provide updates on related prosecutions, with Vincent's case leading to indictments against dozens of other executives involved in similar schemes throughout the region. The consulting firm's records had revealed a network of corporate takeovers designed to steal pension funds and sell proprietary technology to foreign competitors. Vincent's appeals had been rejected by federal courts, with judges noting the overwhelming evidence of his crimes and the severity of his impact on innocent employees and their families. His lawyers had abandoned his case after discovering their own legal exposure for helping him hide stolen assets and offshore accounts. The employee trust Thomas had created was generating stronger profits than Vincent's cost-cutting measures ever achieved, proving that treating workers fairly actually improved business performance rather than reducing it. Client relationships had strengthened under ethical leadership, with several major contracts being renewed specifically because of our reputation for integrity. Miles's undercover work had been more extensive than anyone realized, with FBI agents training him to gather evidence while maintaining his normal job responsibilities and avoiding suspicion from Vincent's security team. His technical skills had been crucial for documenting the digital aspects of Vincent's crimes, including unauthorized access to client databases and theft of proprietary software. Deborah's recording equipment had captured conversations involving multiple criminal conspiracies, with her evidence being used in prosecutions across 3 different states where Vincent's organization had operated. Her courage in maintaining her cover identity while gathering dangerous evidence had probably saved dozens of other companies from similar attacks. The diner where our confrontation occurred had been purchased by federal agents months earlier, providing them with complete control over the environment and ensuring high-quality surveillance equipment for recording Vincent's confessions. The truck drivers Deborah and I had noticed were actually FBI personnel maintaining security throughout the operation. Thomas's final gift to his employees extended beyond just saving their jobs and pension funds, including life insurance policies that provided additional financial security for families and educational benefits that helped workers develop new skills. Vincent had planned to eliminate all these programs while increasing his own compensation package. My daughter's school had been under FBI protection throughout Vincent's threats, with federal agents disguised as maintenance workers and substitute teachers ensuring her safety while gathering evidence about Vincent's willingness to target innocent children. She never knew about the danger, continuing her normal routine of classes and ballet lessons. The frozen bank accounts and insurance problems I had experienced were actually FBI strategies for limiting my financial resources while protecting me from Vincent's retaliation, with agents ensuring that no real harm came to my family's security. All the money was restored with interest once Vincent's arrest was completed. Vincent's black cars and surveillance teams had been monitored constantly by federal agents, with FBI personnel documenting every illegal activity while ensuring that witness safety remained the top priority. The pressure tactics that seemed so intimidating at the time were actually helping to build the prosecution's case. Cobalt Technologies now employed more people than ever before, with ethical business practices attracting talented workers who wanted to contribute to a company that valued integrity over profit margins. Thomas's vision of treating employees like family members had proven to be not just morally right but also financially successful. The legacy Thomas left behind wasn't just a saved company or convicted criminals. but a demonstration that ordinary people with courage and determination could defeat powerful corruption when they worked together for justice. Vincent's downfall proved that no amount of money or influence could protect someone who chose greed over ethics. Agent Colton's final report credited our cooperation with exposing a criminal network that had stolen over $50 million from employee pension funds across the region, with our evidence leading to recovery of most stolen assets and lengthy prison sentences for everyone involved in the conspiracy.